So yesterday we learned that Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired four-star general, confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that because he does not want a military that is loyal to the United States Constitution. He wants a military that is loyal to him. He wants a military who will be loyal to him personally, one that will obey his orders even when he tells them to break the law or abandon their oath to the Constitution of the United States. In just the past week, Donald Trump has repeatedly called his fellow Americans the enemy from within, and even said that he would use the United States military to go after American citizens. And let's be clear about who he considers to be the enemy from within. Anyone who refuses to bend a knee or dares to criticize him would qualify, in his mind, as the enemy within, like judges, like journalists, like nonpartisan election officials. It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is, from the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room. And it is clear from John Kelly's words that Donald Trump is someone who, I quote, certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, who in fact vowed to be a dictator on day one and vowed to use the military as his personal militia to carry out his personal and political vendettas. Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable. And in a second term, people like John Kelly would not be there to be the guardrails against his propensities and his actions. Those who once tried to stop him from pursuing his worst impulses would no longer be there, and no longer be there to rein him in. So the bottom line is this: we know what Donald Trump wants. He wants unchecked power. The question in 13 days will be, what do the American people want? Thank you.
Vice President, do you have any reaction to what the President said about locking him up?
We've been listening to Vice President Kamala Harris speaking there from the Vice President's residence at the Naval Observatory, essentially calling out Donald Trump, reiterating reporting that Trump's former Chief of Staff, John Kelly, told reporters that Trump invoked Hitler during conversations, saying that he wanted generals that were as loyal as Hitler's generals. She went on to say that it is deeply troubling and dangerous that Trump would compare himself to Hitler, obviously the former German leader responsible for millions of deaths, hundreds of thousands of American deaths, millions of Jews killed in the Holocaust. She described Trump as unhinged and unstable, and also added that in a second Trump administration, there would be no John Kellys around to restrain him from his worst instincts.
Yeah, she's trying to say that he is increasingly unhinged and unstable, and that what he wants is unchecked power. She's trying to say, you've seen him before, but actually this is going to be a different thing if he is reelected. We have a soundbite. Let's listen to it.
Certainly, the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian, admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure. He commented more than once that, that Hitler did some good things too.
And those are some of the comments that have created this moment that Harris is trying to capitalize here in this race. Let's bring in our panel here to talk a little bit about this. Kristen Soltis Anderson, Karen Finney, and Jim Sciutto with us. Kristen, what do you think about what you're seeing here as Harris is trying to highlight this moment, which does sort of hew to the reporting that we've had at CNN, which is that she does want to do this. She wants to highlight where Donald Trump is having these moments that may be alarming to some voters.
I think it's clear that the strategy in the last week or two has been to pivot back to this messaging about Donald Trump as a threat to democracy. And I suspect the reason for this is that they view very reliable Republican voters who are skeptical of Donald Trump, maybe not as someone that they could convince to outright vote for Harris, but they can convince them, do you really want to go to sleep at night knowing you voted for Donald Trump? And if they can plant that seed in the minds of enough of these Republicans who really don't like Trump, I think it's clear that that is a strategy they want to pursue. This reporting is obviously pretty serious, and it seems clear with her taking the bold step of saying, I'm going to do a press conference in the middle of the day, not taking questions, but I'm going to do a statement in the middle of the day. It's clear this is a message they want to drive home.
Yeah, I think there's actually a couple of other things, too. I was in Pennsylvania over the weekend, and women voters who I spoke to who had previously voted for Trump, what they said was, he keeps talking about revenge, and I'm worried. What about me? This is a woman who's concerned about Social Security, recently diagnosed with cancer, so her health care is on her mind. I don't hear him talking about me. I hear him talking about revenge, and my husband and I are worried about that. So I think part of it is also to say, if he's so focused on revenge, he's not going to be focused on you. So voting for him is a risk. Is it a risk you're willing to take? And we think he's not focused on you, he's focused on himself. And so I think they're trying to do a couple of things and, frankly, suppress votes of people who may not vote for her, but maybe they'd just say, you know what, I'm just not going to vote this time and won't vote for him again.
Jim, in your most recent book, you actually published conversations you had with the former chief of staff, John Kelly, in which he details this fascination that Trump has for Hitler.
Praise. I mean, if there's a historical figure that you would think everyone could agree on, you cannot say a kind word about, it would be Adolf Hitler, I expect, right? So let me quote John Kelly's firsthand account. John Kelly, 40-year Marine general, rose from enlisted men to the highest rank, a 4-star general, Gold Star father as well. Here is his firsthand account of Trump talking about Hitler. He said, well, Hitler, he did some good things. I said, well, what? And he said, well, Hitler rebuilt the economy. But what did he do with that rebuilt economy? He turned it against his own people and against the world. And I said, sir, you could never say anything good about the guy, nothing. I mean, Mussolini was a great guy by comparison. I should also note that Kelly recounted how he, much like Jeffrey Goldberg found in his Atlantic piece, also talked about how Nazi generals, Hitler's generals, were more loyal to him than American generals were to Trump. Now, this is, again, his chief of staff recounting words he heard from Trump in his face directly. The other point I would make about this is that the praise for Hitler and the praise for strongmen authoritarians around the world is not limited to him, because Trump has said and continues to say, and by the way, not in private, but in public, kind and praising words about Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Viktor Orban, who are not just authoritarians, but have committed crimes against their own people, right? Turned the state against their own people. And of course, he's saying those praising things as he's talking about an enemy in this country. So the comments aren't just shocking, they're also consequential in that they give you a sense of how he might govern.
We want to keep this conversation going, but we do want to go to Elena Treen, who is in Georgia following Donald Trump, because there is some reaction from the Trump campaign. Elena, what are you hearing?
That's right, there is. We have heard a number of Trump advisors and people like Mark Meadows, Kash Patel, really heavily push back on this. I'm going to read for you something that Stephen Chung, a top Trump campaign advisor, told me in response to some of this last night. He said, quote, that Kelly had totally beclowned himself with these debunked stories he has fabricated because he failed to serve his president well while working as chief of staff and currently suffers from a debilitating case of Trump derangement syndrome. So clearly they are pushing back very heavily on this. But I do want to take a step back because I have covered Donald Trump for a number of years. I also was covering the White House when John Kelly was serving as Donald Trump's chief of staff. And I think it's important To add the context of who John Kelly is, he served in the military. Also, I'd note that his son was killed, and he also served in the military. So this is something that is deeply personal to Kelly. I know that he is someone who very much takes the Constitution very seriously, and he took that role very seriously. I think that's why when you listen to some of the recordings from the New York Times, you heard him say that he had told Donald Trump in the past while they were in the White House that I don't serve you, I'm serving the Constitution. So that's some of the context around this. But also, I don't think we can overstate how big of a development this is coming just 2 weeks before the election. We know that it's not just Kelly among those who had served with Donald Trump when he was in office who have been kind of trying to raise alarm bells about what it would mean for him to be president once again. We've also heard criticisms from Mark Milley, from Jim Mattis, from John Bolton, from Bill Barr, a lot of people who had served with him. And I think the timing of these comments is important because I think, you're really seeing people in the 11th hour now say a lot of this publicly.